Hey everybody, this is chapter 4, the safe food handler. So this is about you as a food handler, what you can do to help prevent foodborne illness. So how can food handlers contaminate food? Well, there's a lot of different ways that you as a person can contaminate food that you are serving, prepping, serving, or even come in contact with. So here's some scenarios. So situations that can lead to contaminated food are if you have a sickness yourself, so if you have a foodborne illness. If you have wounds or boils that contain a pathogen on your arms, you itch them and then you touch food. If you sneeze or cough into food, like the picture shows. If you have contact with a person who is sick, so if your relatives, your friends, or other coworkers who are sick. If you use the restroom and do not wash your hands, remember that is called the fecal oral route. That's why you need to wash your hands as soon as you leave, or as soon as you get out of the stall, to wash your hands in the bathroom, and then as soon as you come into the kitchen. And if you have symptoms such as diarrhea, vomiting, or jaundice, which is the yellowing of the eyes and the skin. So if you have any of those, you should probably stay home. So how can food handlers contaminate food? So if you see the picture on the right of the screen, you have a food handler who looks very shabby-esque. He's not as bad as the guy from the video that we saw, but he's still not good. So actions that can contaminate food is scratching the scalp, running your fingers through your hair, wiping or touching your nose, rubbing an ear, touching a pimple or infected wound on your body or your face, wearing a dirty uniform to work if you work with food, sneezing or coughing into your hand and then touching food, and spitting in the operation, near or around food. You shouldn't spit in the kitchen anyway, but as you spit, spores come out of your mouth that can float in the air. And you want to prevent those because those can float around and then land on food. So diseases that are not transmitted through food. So when a staff member has HIV or AIDS, if they have tuberculosis, or if they have hepatitis B or C. So the ADA, which is also known as the Americans with Disabilities Act, provides employees with civil rights protection. If you have HIV and are HIV positive, you cannot be fired or transferred because you have this disease. Just because you have it does not mean you can get fired, transferred, or anything. It does not get transferred by food. It's a blood-borne pathogen in your blood. If you get cut, that's how it's transferred. But you're not allowed to transfer anybody. Employees must maintain the confidentiality of any staff who has that illness and that is not foodborne. So if you have 2 employees, one has norovirus and one has HIV or AIDS, you can only say that the employee with norovirus has norovirus. You cannot tell everybody else that the other employee has HIV or AIDS. It's because norovirus is a foodborne illness. HIV and AIDS is not. So a good personal hygiene program. It's very important for you as a manager to make sure your employees come to work clean, in clean clothes, trimmed short nails, no polish, no earrings, no heavy makeup, hair clean, pulled back. So you need to create personal hygiene policies that state all of those that I just mentioned. Training food handlers on personal hygiene policies and retraining them regularly. If you see a member or food handler coming to work and their hair slowly gets looser and looser and hanging down, you need to retrain them. Modeling correct behavior at all times. That means you as a manager, if you're a manager, need to have slip-resistant shoes, pants that cover your legs, socks, short nails, non-polished, hair back, pretty much what I look like every day. And revising personal hygiene policies when laws or science change, because laws and science continuously change. So as long as you keep up, you should be fine as long as you follow those rules. Where to wash hands? Only wash your hands in a designated sink for hand washing. In my kitchen, I have 2. There's one by my office and there's one by the chemical closet. You need to turn it on and only wash your hands in those hand washing sinks. You never want to wash your hands that are used for food prep or dishwashing, or any sinks that are used for wastewater. So my utility sink, that's in the chemical closet. And then hand washing is the most important part of a personal hygiene program. You can prevent most of foodborne illnesses just by washing your hands. So, per Miss Urshray's room, I'm sure you've all learned how to properly wash your hands. We're going to go over this really quick. So there's 5 steps. You need to wet your hands and arms with water at least 100 degrees or as hot as you can stand. Apply soap and apply a good lather. This soap can be liquid, gel, foaming, bar, or powder. Does not matter as long as it's good antibacterial soap. Scrub your hands and arms vigorously for 10 to 15 seconds. Clean under the nails, under the fingertips, in between fingers, above the palm, on the back of your hand, and halfway up your forearm. Rinse your hands with that same warm water, and then dry hands with a single-use paper towel or a hand dryer, a hot air hand dryer. Avoid contaminating clean hands, because once your hands are clean and you touch the door to get out, your hands are no longer clean. So you should consider using a paper towel to turn off the faucet and open the door. Or if someone's coming in the bathroom, they can hopefully is nice enough and hold the door open for you so you can leave. But never touch your hands to the door because they're contaminated once again. When to wash hands. So you want to wash your hands before prepping food, working with clean equipment and utensils, and before putting on single-use gloves. If your hands are dirty and you put gloves on, those gloves are not clean anymore. They're contaminated and they are still dirty. After, you want to make sure you wash your hands after you use the restroom. This is common sense and hopefully common knowledge. Touching the body or clothing. This one's kind of hard because you don't know that you're doing it, but the more you are aware of your own actions, the easier it is to not touch your body or clothing. Coughing, sneezing, or blowing your nose, or using a handkerchief or tissue. Definitely make sure you wash your hands after that. Eating, drinking, smoking, or chewing gum or tobacco. This is pretty much after you come back from break, you should wash your hands. Handling soiled items, so dirty equipment, tables, towels, linens, any of that nature. Handling raw meat, seafood, or poultry. And then, of course, taking out the garbage because bacteria love the trash and the garbage cans, and there's so much that crawls on it all of the time. Okay. After handling service or aquatic animals, after handling chemicals that could affect food, which is mostly all of them, after changing tasks or before starting a new one. This is basically if you're going from cutting chicken to cutting beef, you want to stop, wash your hands, change your gloves, and pretty much just all the time. After leaving or returning the kitchen prep area, my rule is if you step foot off the blue floor in my kitchen, you have to wash your hands as soon as you come back, no matter what you did. Handling money, because money and electronic devices, which is the next one, harvest so much bacteria. It is gross. So definitely wash your hands after those two. And then basically touching anything that may contaminate hands. So wise word in the kitchen is wash your hands frequently, often. If you don't remember when the last time you washed your hands were, it's probably a good time to go ahead and wash your hands. All right, corrective actions. So if food handlers have touched food or food contact starts with unclean hands, what should you do? Number 1, dispose of that contaminated food. You don't know what could be in there. It could get someone sick. Just throw it away. Clean potentially contaminated equipment and utensils. So stop what you're doing. After you throw away the food, bring everything that you touched to dish pit. Have them clean it. And then you can retrain or coach food handlers who are not following the correct hand washing procedures if necessary. If there's someone in your group that does not wash their hands, you should train them. Be like, hey, let's come over here, take a minute, let's wash our hands together. If not, let me know and I will definitely retrain them myself. Hand antiseptics. We all learned what this was about a couple years ago from COVID. They were very popular. They sold out everywhere. People are selling them for $10 for a small jar. These are good to use. They are basically liquids or gels that are used to lower the number of pathogens on a skin. So basically think of sanitizer for pots and pans. Hand sanitizer is that for our hands. So if used, there are a few rules that you have to follow. They must comply with the CFR and FDA standards. You should only use them after hand washing, and you can never they can never be used in place of hand washing. You have to wash your hands before. And they should be allowed to dry before touching food or equipment, because if this chemical on your hand, the hand sanitizer, is still wet when you touch food, it is known as a chemical hazard. But once it's dry, you are safe to go. So, food handler requirements. I'm very, very big on this one. If you have polished nails or if you have fake nails, you will wear gloves all of the time, and they have to fit your hands. So if your nails are too long that the gloves do not fit around your wrist, you will either have to take your nails off, or you'll have to honestly take the zero, because your gloves still have to fit properly. So you should keep fingernails short and clean, like this first picture on the left. Do not have false nails, because bacteria can live in between your false nail and your real nail, and underneath where it lifts can live in there. And then you do not want to wear polish, because if you wear polish, underneath is where dirt and grossness can live, because you can't see through your nail because of the polish blocking it. Okay. Wounds and cuts that could be infected. So infective wounds, cuts, or boils, a lot of them contain pus, and so they could actually pop and drain. They should be covered, because if they accidentally do get popped, they are a biohazard, because it is bodily fluid that can go into food. How a wound is covered depends on where it's located. So if it's on your hand, finger, or wrist, you want to make sure it's covered with a bandage or finger cot, actually both, and then a single-use glove like in the picture. If it's on the arm, you should cover it with a bandage, and then if it's other part of the body, make sure it's dried with a tight-fitting bandage. That way it can't leak anywhere. It can't actually just cover it with a Band-Aid, and it should be good. Okay, bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food. So bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food can pose a really high risk to foodborne illness, so you want to touch it never. Avoid bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food unless the food is an ingredient in a dish that does not contain raw meat, poultry, or seafood, and the dish will be cooked to at least 145 degrees, or the food is an ingredient in a dish containing raw meat, seafood, and poultry, and will be cooked to the minimum internal cooking temperatures of the raw items. So basically what we do in the kitchen is you can touch the food as long as it's going to be cooked. If it's going to be cooked, you are fine. But if it's not going to be cooked, you should wear gloves. Or once it's cooked, wear gloves. Single-use gloves should be just that, single-used. They act as a barrier between your hands and the food. They can never be used in place of hand washing, because if your hands are not clean, you touch the gloves, those gloves are now not clean at all. Should be used when we're handling ready-to-eat foods, except when you're washing produce, or you're cooking a food that's going to be cooked at the correct internal temperature. Gloves also give you a false sense of security. You need to make sure that you're changing them often and washing your hands. Just because you have a pair of gloves on for 4 hours does not mean that you haven't created cross-contamination or cross-contact. So watch which gloves to buy. They have to be approved for food service. They should be disposable. They should never be washed and reused. They're called disposable for a reason. You should have multiple sizes available. So in my kitchen, I have small, medium, large, and extra large. Those should fit everybody's hands. And they should be made of latex alternatives, because latex is an allergy and people can be allergic to it. So if you prep their food with latex, chances are if they eat it, they're going to get sick. How to use gloves. So you should wash your hands before putting on the gloves and when starting a new task. you do not need to rewash your hands each time changing gloves if you perform the same action. So basically, if I had someone cutting chicken and they wanted to change gloves because the gloves were too big or too small, they could just put on a new pair. They do not have to wash their hands. However, if it was a different task, they would. Make sure you have the correct glove size that fits your hands snugly, not too loose, not too tight, because they will rip. Hold the gloves by the edge when putting them on. Once they're on, check for rips and tears. This is where that glove size comes in. If it's too loose, they're going to fall off. If it's too tight, they're going to rip. Do not blow into the gloves with your mouth, because if you're sick, you're going to spread pathogens. Do not roll them to make them easier to put on. And like I said in the last slide, never wash and reuse gloves. They are disposable for a reason. When to change gloves, as soon as they become dirty or torn. This should be pretty common sense. If there's holes in them or they're dirty, change them. Before beginning a different task. After an interruption, such as taking a phone call, because after you take a phone call, you should take your gloves off because you don't want what you're touching on the phone. After handling raw meat, seafood, or poultry, and before handling ready-to-eat food. And then after 4 hours of continuous use, you want to change your gloves. So other good personal hygiene practices, managers must make sure that everybody washes themselves, their hair, because those pathogens can be found on hair and skin. They have to be clean. Make sure that the staff shower and bathe before work. If they do not come to work clean and it becomes a problem, you'll have to fire that employee or find out why they cannot come to work clean. And set up a dress code. Make sure the staff follows the dress code. When I worked at the Ritz-Carlton, we had laundry. So I would check in to loss prevention, go to laundry, get my uniform, go to the locker room, change out of my street clothes, put my uniform on, go to work, clock out later, go to the laundry locker room, change out of my work uniform, back to my street clothes, and drop off my uniform. So I can guarantee that my uniform was clean every single time I put it on. Work attire. Food handlers must use hair restraints. In my kitchen, you have to wear a hairnet and a hat. The hat needs to be clean, and the hairnets are disposable. Do not wear hair accessories that could become physical contaminants, so nothing with jewels on them. Do not wear false eyelashes. They can and mostly will fall off because of the steam and the heat of a kitchen. And if you have a beard, like this beautiful picture, you have to wear a restraint over your facial hair, because just like your hair on the top of your head, your beard hair can also fall out. So, clean clothing. Wear clean clothing every single day. Make sure your uniforms, change your uniforms, including your aprons when they are soiled. A lot of times you could bring extra aprons, extra chef jackets. If they look dirty, change them. Change into your work clothes at work, if possible. Store street clothing and personal belongings in designated areas, away from the kitchen, away from food prep areas. Like I said, at the Ritz, I had a locker room. Keep dirty clothing away from food and food prep areas because they could harbor pathogens, and if you touch them and touch food, you can get people sick. Food handlers must handle aprons correctly. So aprons should be removed when you're leaving the food prep areas. In my kitchen, by the door to go to G Hall, I have hooks. If you are to leave the kitchen floor for any reason, you are to take off your apron, hang it up, remember which hook you put it on, and never ever wipe your hands on your apron. We have side towels for that reason. Remove all jewelry from hands and arms before prepping, except you can wear a plain band ring. Bracelets, including medical bracelets and watches. All that needs to come off. It's food safety. If it breaks, it goes into food. It can get people sick, break your teeth. Remove other jewelry as required by your company. So, depending on where you work, you can have a nose ring, you can have earrings, you can have an eyebrow ring, a tongue ring, a lip ring, anything like that. It's up to the individual company. For me and my kitchen, you can have facial piercings as long as they don't fall out. But you do have to take off rings, bracelets, necklaces, and watches. I do allow for you to wear them, but to be careful. Food handlers may only eat, drink, and smoke or chew gum in designated areas. Usually that's an employee lounge. And they must never do any of that when prepping or serving food, working in food prep areas, and working in areas used to clean utensils and equipment. So in the kitchen while you're cooking or doing dishes, you should not eat, drink, or smoke, chew gum, or tobacco. Some exceptions. If you see in the picture, the top one, this gentleman has a cup with a lid and a straw. So from that cup, he has a straw because your mouth or your fingers aren't going to touch where your mouth goes. You can also use hydro flasks, sports bottles, anything that's not going to go from your mouth to your fingers you can use. Food may be tasted during preparation. So in the picture you can see it's an approved utensil, and it's an utensil that's only used once. So plastic spoons, plastic forks, remember you're not eating, you are tasting. There's a difference. So you can grab a little bit, try it. Do not try it over the food that you're eating, but dip it in, get a small cup of it, go by the trash can, try it, throw it away. Reporting health issues. Tell staff to let you know when they are sick. You can also do this by having them sign documentation when they first get hired, that they agree that if they are sick with vomiting, diarrhea, or jaundice, or any symptoms that come from the big 6 pathogens, that they must let you know as soon as possible, so that way you can coordinate the rest of the employees. Documentation showing staff they have completed training, which includes information on the importance of reporting illnesses. And then you can also have pocket signs or signs just around, so that way people know and your employees know that if they're sick, they need to let you know. Staff must report illnesses before they come to work. If they get sick while they're working, if they or someone they live with or have been in contact with is diagnosed with any of these pathogens, from norovirus, Hep A, Shigella, E. coli, Salmonella typhi, and non-typhoidal Salmonella, since these are the big 6 pathogens. When food handlers are sick, you may need to restrict them from working with exposed food utensils and equipment, or exclude them from the operation. This is especially important if they have vomiting, diarrhea, jaundice, sore throat and fever, or an infected wound or boil that is opening and draining, unless it is properly covered like mentioned beforehand. So watch for these signs of illness: vomiting, excessive trips to the bathroom, yellowing of the skin, eyes, and fingernails, cold sweats or chills. They could indicate a fever, persistent nasal discharge, and sneezing. So you'll see it. If they start sneezing, they start running to the bathroom. Ask them if they're sick. If they say no and they keep going, send them home. Best way is, when in doubt, send them home. So restricting or excluding staff. So if a food handler has an infected wound or boil that is not properly covered, you should restrict them from working with exposed utensils and equipment until they can get it properly covered. If the food handler has a sore throat with a fever, you should restrict them from working with exposed food utensils and equipment, or exclude them if they're working with a high-risk population. A written release from a medical doctor is required to return to work. The food handler has persistent coughing, sneezing, or runny nose, and discharge from the eyes, nose, or mouth. You should restrict them so they cannot work with food, utensils, or equipment, but they can do inventory. They can clean dishes, they can clean the floor, they can organize, they can do paperwork. They just cannot work exposed food, utensils, and equipment. If the food handler has at least one of these symptoms, vomiting, diarrhea, or jaundice, you should exclude the food handler from the operation. If they have vomiting and diarrhea, they have to have no symptoms for at least 24 hours or a doctor's note. Jaundice. Report food handlers to the regulatory authority, the DPH, or the Department of Public Health. Exclude food handlers who have jaundice for 7 days or less. Before returning to work, food handlers must have both a written release from the medical doctor and approval from the health department. If the food handler is vomiting or has diarrhea and has been diagnosed with any illness caused by norovirus, Shigella, non-typhoid salmonella, or E. coli, and the food handler has been diagnosed with an illness caused by these pathogens, hepatitis A or Salmonella typhi, you should exclude the food handler from the operation, report it to the regulatory authority, and work with their medical practitioner and the local regulatory authority to let them know when they can come back to work. And that is it for Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is very, once again, self-explanatory. It's how to keep things clean, how to keep yourself clean, how to prevent it spreading foodborne illnesses if you are sick or if your food handlers are sick, because if they're sick, they should stay home because no one wants to get other people sick on purpose.